I just didn't click the other button.
Yep, there you are. I see you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
We were.
all right. So we got Casey and we got Don. How y'all doing? I'm Diane. Nice to meet y'all.
Doing just fine. Nice to meet you as well.
So Brian and I decided we wanted to talk about free will today. And Brian, I'm gonna let you lead on this one.
Okay. So actually, I thought this would be really interesting. I really was curious, like in your reconstruction, like where you were when you were still in your faith strongly, as compared to where you are now, and maybe if you could, like, because I only know anecdotally sort of things that I've looked into, not really deeply about what the Bible says about these things. I suspect not much of anything
Hmm.
along those notions that it's, so where from your experiences in your community were you and are you now on the notion of free will, and where does that come from both perspectives? That I think that's really interesting to me, because then I can provide sort of the more of the philosophical, and I tend to take the scientific standpoint. That's kind of
Hmm.
where I come from. So I think it'd be really interesting to contrast those. I think Don may have some very interesting things to say there, and I know Casey will too. So, we'll
Okay.
just go round table.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as free will goes, I was always taught that we have free will, that God gave us free will. And, you know, as a Christian, I believed in free will. But as a non believer, I don't believe that we were, if you go by what the Bible says, we weren't really given free will, because to me, free will means that, I can do, to me, you may say different, but free will means like I have the will, I can do whatever I want to do without these eternal consequences. But the Bible teaches that, if you don't follow Christ and you don't do this, you don't do that, then you're going to go to hell. So to me, that's not free will. Like if I just go do whatever I feel like doing, then I'm going to be punished for it. Then that's not free will. But at the same time, like, you know, well, that's getting into something else. But there are scriptures, and I looked up, some scriptures after we talked about this, what we were going to discuss, and there are verses that support free will, and there are verses that support predestination or divine control. So, of course, with everything else with the Bible, there's a lot of contradictions. So, we're told, that we have a choice, but then there's other scriptures that says that, like it says, for those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. And then there's a scripture that says he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him. And then it says, no one, another one, John 6:44 says, no one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them. And so that's not free will. That's saying that God is picking and choosing who he's going to draw to him, who's going to be a part of him. That's not free will. That means it's already determined. And then that's one of the things I said. Uh, I've said to family members, it's like, okay, well, if God predestined everything, then He already destined me to not be a believer. It's like that's already a given. And um, if that's already a given, then what I'm doing now is not of my control. That's not of my free will. That's He already chose this for me. Make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, sure. So we're like, so you don't believe in the notion of free will, or is free will something different to you?
I don't believe in the notion of free will, as it when it comes to the Bible. I don't believe that there's truly free will in the Bible. Um, and then also free will. I mean, to me, that states that I'm free to do whatever I want to do. Well, I'm not free to do whatever I want to do. I can't do just whatever I want to do. Like that's not free will. So No, I don't believe there's free will. I don't.
Mm. Don, do you have anything you want to say there? I'm interested in, like, does the Bible actually talk about you? You talk about things like being able to make your own choice, and I guess because from those notions, God gives you this feeling of choice and free will, and then if you make the wrong choices, then you're punished for them, in a sense. Is that right? Is that how, is that how that works?
That's a fairly accurate description. We are promised that the Creator imbued us with free will and the ability to make our own decisions based on the information at hand. And then again, same time, promises a harsh and swift punishment, forever eternal, if you do make the wrong decisions. And so, in a way, you do have free will, but you're not allowed to exercise it through the frame of Christianity.
Yeah.
Um, with my deconstruction from religion and the study of philosophy and physics and a little bit of chemistry and a lot of biology, uh, I don't think that there really is a free will that is truly free. Um, I have a somewhat deterministic view, probably better described as compatibilism, kind of a middle ground. Uh, I see degrees of freedom. The more rational control we have over a situation or a decision or a choice, the freer we are. I feel like we can be um, misled by strong emotion in our decision making, and I think that's self-evident in everyday catastrophes that could have been prevented. Um, if if you look at it at like self-control versus coercion, if there's no external force that's compelling us, then in a practical sense, then we're free. So if there's no prime mover, if there's no super agent, if you will, then yeah, we're free practically, yet still have to abide by the laws of physics and the way chemistry reacts because of our biological brain. And I see consciousness and everything that comes along with it, rationality, as an emergence of our physicality and biology. Um, and I see the social utility of an idea of free will that is truly free. Um, it helps keep people responsible for their own actions and maintain a a moral self control that maybe wouldn't be present if we didn't have a concept of free will. Because if
Mm.
you can't control any of your choices, then why should you control any of your choices or even try? And so, yeah, compatibilism, I think, is probably a good descriptor of my view.
Mm. Any comments there, Diane?
So I had one, and I think it left me. So in thinking about free will, do you consider free will being something that true free will being something that you can do whatever it is that you want without consequence? Would you think that would be more of what free will would be if there was a such thing as free will?
Well, without consequence imposed on yourself, yes.
Mm.
Um, it's it's self control, and the idea of free will kind of puts on the responsibility to control those, what do they call them, intrusive thoughts. So
Mm-hmm.
everybody thinks that Maybe it'd be better if I did 85 miles an hour all the way to work, no matter what everybody else around me needs me to do, because I need to get there at this exact moment.
Hmm.
But the social responsibility imposed upon us with the idea of free will also wants to keep those around us safe, or you would want someone to at least believe that way, that it's their choice of driving in a safe manner is going to allow them not only to get to their destination, but everybody around them to get to their destination safely. And so they impose their limits upon themselves that coincide with everybody else's.
Hmm. Yeah. I forgot I could put these up here. Um, Kyle said, "Is if the universe operates on cause and effect, is free will just an illusion?" And I believe that it is an illusion. I don't think there is a such thing as free will. Even whether in within Christianity or outside of Christianity, either way, there's no such thing as free will. Because I mean, it, I, and I mean, if this doesn't make sense, tell me if this is outside of what you think free will is. I think free will, I should be able to eat and drink and do whatever I want to do and still be healthy. Does that fall in the line of what free will could be? You know?
Well,
Mhm.
maybe free will without consequence, but um, I've never seen such a thing happen. Um, if I decide to have uh, a large stack of pancakes covered in butter and drowned in maple syrup, I'm going to enjoy that, and I'm going to think with the input that I'm getting from my taste buds that I'm having a good time, and this might be a good thing because I'm having a good time because it tastes good. But in reality, we know what that butter and that sugar is doing to an aging body, which I happen to have.
Yeah.
And so the consequence has to come along with the choice, just due to the fact that we live in a physical universe. You can't
Mhm.
separate your choice from a consequence.
Right.
And so, the free will to do this won't take you away the consequence from what happens if you do it.
I
But
think
the free will
free
would
will and
be the fact that you got the choice to begin with. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that free will and choice, I don't think they're the same thing. I think that having free will and being able to make a choice is not really the same thing. Like we can choose whatever we want to choose, but it's not free. It's not free will. There's a consequence. So if there's a consequence, then it's not free, right? The definition of free will is the power of acting without the constraint of necessity or fate, the ability to act at one's own discretion. And yeah, we can act and do the things that we want to do, but it's not. Um, but there's going to be a consequence for it. You know, if I go in here and eat a whole pack of bacon like I would enjoy doing, then my blood pressure is going to be through the roof, and I'm not going to feel very good. So I can make that choice to do that, but it's not free will because I'm gonna have consequences for that.
Okay, see, now I've found that you and I have a contradiction in definitions.
Okay.
I view free will as the idea that we have control over our decisions and our actions, but not the consequence of them.
Okay. I get that. I think that is more just a choice, not necessarily free will. Um, because if it says the power of acting without the necessity, without the constraint of necessity or fate, well, fate is the consequence, right, Brian?
Sorry, I was listening to you guys go back and forth. There's so much we've been through. So much. My only place to be would just be to start where I kind of stand on free will, I think, and I take a pretty hard approach to it. I'm what you might call a hard determinist, meaning there is no such thing as free will. Anything that we know from my perspective can basically be defined best within our physical understanding of the universe, empirically. And all of the evidence that we have is what we understand about physicality, the physics, the nature of our universe. Anything beyond physical, we've never proven. So, therefore, if you're thinking there is something beyond physics that is driving our ability to make these decisions or agency or whatever it is you want to call, um, that all fits within determinism. It fits within physics. It fits in, it's like we were talking about this earlier before we got on here. And, does a single celled organism like an amoeba make an active agent choice to, say, reach out an appendage of its body and grab some food that it's detected? Is that a conscious choice? Does an amoeba even have a conscience, a consciousness, sentience, if you will? I mean, we could break that down because it's mostly probably just chemical calculus, physical. They have ion channels through membranes and have logical gates, just like anything else does that has to make some sort of logical choice. But when you compound that by billions of cells in an organism that has an actual sensory organ that is there to make decisions within this consistency, all that fits within physics. So there's nothing that usually people are describing by the notion of free will that is unique to what physics already can't describe better. Um, Otherwise, if you are talking about a free will that there is something beyond physics, then there's nothing provable there. So whether it's an illusion or not, I mean, it sure seems like an illusion. Perception, reality can all seem like an illusion depending on what scale, what magnitude you look at it. Um, I embrace that there is a reality that I have to contend with on a moment by moment basis. Um, so that's as real as anything is to me. So yeah, I think that's where I would maybe differ from Don only by description, just because I used to be in the compatible range, of saying that there's a way I could justify something that we could call free will. And I still think we could, but once again, I don't think that that defines anything unique that, you know, determinism, physicalism, physics can't already define in a better way, if you will. Um, so, anyways, I talked long enough. I wanted to see if Dahl wanted to say something here.
I think my position is kind of a mix mash of everyone. Like I'm a pluralist, so I tend to think that free will and determinism are sort of mental constructs that we create and apply to reality. And so I think it's kind of arbitrary which one you want to be like the basis that ever. So I could imagine seeing the world as like a place of pure freedom that is then constrained by the laws of physics. And I could imagine seeing the world as the laws of physics just playing out and freedom or free will being like a consequence of the laws of physics. Like we have a certain amount of choice, and we kind of covered the difference between choice and free will, or what people think of the difference between choice and free will here. And so I really think that it's kind of up to the individual. I think it's a like chaos and order are two sides of the same coin. Free will and determinism are two sides of the same coin, and you could see either as being the fundamental thing that reality works with, just based on how you want to see the world, I guess. Yeah, I think that's my position, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It does. There's a lot to go through there. Philosophically, I wonder if many people who are out there, understand what pluralism and what its implications are across things like free will, determinism, God, religion, all those things. That's an interesting topic to maybe dig down sometime. Dal's an interesting character.
Is
Hey,
this
Luke.
Luke?
Hello, hello. How are you doing?
All right. How are you, Luke? You doing
I'm
all
good.
right?
Good. Yeah. There was somebody named Sass who sent me the link
Sass
to
sent you.
this. That's who? Sorry.
Yeah, Sass sent you. Yeah, Kyle.
Yeah, Sass sent me to the wolves. That's what happens. It's like, what did you do, Sass? He said there was a conversation about free will, and if we wanted to have to jump in the conversation, we could jump in. And I'm like, yeah, cool. I like this subject of free will because it is so close to the subject of the existence of God. Um, the thing with free will and God, both of them have the same trouble. Those who claim that they do not exist don't know what would convince them otherwise. Um, uh, who is there someone here that agree or that free will doesn't exist, or possibly that it doesn't exist, or there is no free will, this kind of thing?
I I don't think there's free will. Um,
Okay, so the question would be, what would convince you that there is?
what was the question? What convinced you
What
that
would
there is free
convince you,
will?
Diane,
What
that
would
free will
convince me?
exists?
I mean, if I could, I think that if I could do whatever I wanted to do without consequence, then I would believe I had free will.
So let's say you want to fly in the sky and you will be able to fly in the sky, then you will be convinced that there is free will.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that's the thing with this kind of answer, and I agree with you. It could be one of the meaning what free will imply. But most people, when they say free will, are not talking of going against the rules of nature. They are talking to go with the freedom is constrained by the rules of nature. So are you still saying that there's no free will when it comes to this definition, or do you want to say there's no free will with your definition, which is going against the rules of nature?
I mean, if you add that to it, that as long as it doesn't go against the rules of nature, then yeah, sure. But you have to add that to it, for it to
Okay.
be free will.
Okay, so you agree there is free will with that new definition, things that allow us to, it's not completely free. There are the rules of nature that constrict this kind of freedom. Yeah, cool. So I agree with you on that subject that there is free will with this definition, and I agree with you that there is no free will with the other definition because, well, I cannot fly in the sky. That's something pretty obvious. So I can change mint into gold and this kind of thing. Well, that's the end of the conversation.
So I listen to a lot of people
right.
who are a lot smarter than me, and one of them, those people, is Robert Sapolsky, and he does, he's been through the same question about, what would take it to convince you that free will exists, and he's like, find those neurons, or find the neuron or the neurons that acted freely from all the neurotransmitters, electromagnetic signals, hormones, other biological things that are surrounding it, all the other outside stimulus and toxins and environmental things that might be in. Find the neuron or neurons that acted independent of all that, and you would find free will. That's essentially the proof that you would need for free will. Otherwise, everything fits from a physical standpoint within the understanding. Like I said, free will in most people's circumstances doesn't describe anything that physicalism, that physics, that, all that doesn't already describe. It doesn't describe anything unique. And if it is unique, it's describing that magical thing that we don't have any evidence of, that neurons could act independent of all the other things that go on to make neurons work to begin with, or all the stuff that happened prior. Does that make sense?
I understand this need of a proof. Again, the proof is not something that we can measure yet. We might be one day able to measure it, but we don't have the result of this measurement that he's asking for. And therefore, he's basing the foundation of his claim is founded on not knowing. It's a argument from ignorance, fallacy kind of thing. So you don't know, and you say, well, there is no free will because we don't know. That's argument from fallacy. So yeah, there is free will.
Right. So
Argument of faith.
the thing is that neither free will nor determinism are unfalsifiable. So we can't say they're true necessarily or false. But the problem is that we have all this consistency within the universe as we understand it, and that is the physical evidence. And so free will would have the burden of proof against all that evidence, because all we have is the physical evidence. When you start talking about what would make free will true, it would be a jump to no longer anything that we understand physically. Does that make sense?
You're saying that there is no way to invalidate the claim that there is free will.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Or isn't for that matter. But they're both
no, isn't we covered that? But there is a way to invalidate the claim that there is free will. Yeah, a really easy one. It's not that hard to find something that would convince everyone who claims there is free will that there is no free will. It's really easy to think of something, some kind of a test that we could run that would convince those who claim that there is free will that there is no free will. Right? You create a test where you have a coffee cup and you have another thing, a bottle of water, and you say choose, and before the person choose, like before you even ask the person to choose, you already have written down what he would choose, and every time he picked the thing that you wrote down, and that would be a proof that there is a free will, because you never had the chance to choose what was written here.
Right. I think we're saying the same things basically.
Yeah. So there is a way to invalidate the free will, the positive. There is free will. There is no way. There's knowledge. It's not an argument for ignorance when it comes to there is free will.
I see what you're saying. So you are saying there. You think there is a way to necessarily invalidate free will. Is that what you're saying?
There is a way. Yeah. The experience that I just gave you is one of many that you can run that would invalidate the
I think you're talking about the Milgram experiments, which were done like on EEG, I think it was. Yeah, and so that's still, even after 40 or 50 years now, that's still a lot of people call that in question for reasons of intent, desire, all these other notions that we also can't falsify. And they're just words to describe these things that might cause a choice or agency or something of that nature. Still, that doesn't necessarily invalidate it. So we can't say free will is absolutely not true. There's still at this point, I think many of us make that judgment, like I do. I make that belief that free will doesn't exist. I don't know that free will doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what I'm pointing out here in this conversation is that those who claim that there is no free will, or doubt the existence of free will, if you want to, say I'm not sure, maybe there is none, or maybe there is. Those people are making an argument from ignorance. That's the same argument that people say that God exists, or say don't exist, and not God exists. Sorry, those who claim that God doesn't exist, and those who claim that there is not enough evidence for God. Those people are similar in the way that they are making an argument from ignorance. Free will and God, both them, are falsifiable. They hold the claim that it is unfalsifiable and argue from there, but they are mistaken in the claim that free will is unfalsifiable, because free will is falsifiable. The way to falsify free will is using one of those tests that I described earlier.
I didn't want to occupy the mic. I wanted to let other people speak up, like Dahl or Diane or someone. I definitely do have more to say on that, but yeah, go ahead.
Take it away, Brian. Don, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, Don just popped back on too. Maybe Don has something to say. Well, if not, I still live from the perspective that I don't think God is falsifiable. I don't think there's anything that can claim. There are ambiguous notions of God that can't be falsified. I think most notions of God can be falsified by using logical contradictions, things like that. Logical sense, maybe, impossibilities, whatever it is. I still don't think God can totally be completely unfalsified, depending on your notion of what God is. You can define a maximally powerful, maximally interventional, or minimally interventional, or obviously no intervention. So it's so abstract of a claim. There's just no way we can falsify that. And just like free will, there's no way for us to absolutely say that there isn't some magical gap that's happening there that we just can't explain, that's part of physics even. Because if we knew it, if we could repeat it, if we could test it, it would actually become part of physics, and then we could say free will yes or free will no. But
That's what we do.
But the point is, we have this mountain of evidence, and we
There
have
is free will.
zero evidence for free will. That's the only thing that makes it unfalsifiable.
I'm sorry.
Unfalsifiable for me.
Every time, actually, maybe my microphone is.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
You can hear me, because it's some on Google. Anyway, sometimes the microphone mutes itself. Yeah, there is a way to falsify free will, and there are a amount of evidence, a big amount of evidence that there is free will. Every time, how do you call those who predict the future? There is a name for them. Psychics, yeah. Psychics do their thing, and they're wrong, is one of those times where free will is demonstrated. If they were right every time, then there will be no free will, and it will be demonstrated that free will do not exist. Since they are wrong so many times, well, there is free will. That's what we observe when we observe the universe. Psychics are wrong, therefore there is free will. That's really easy, and it's not only once that we observe that. They are wrong like often, like really, really often.
Diane, you're muted if you're talking.
I don't understand. I don't understand how a psychic being wrong proves free will.
Oh, if we didn't have free will, our future will be known. For example, I know that if I drop this coffee cup, it will fall down. Mm-hmm. I know the future of the coffee cup because the coffee cup doesn't have free will. I can say things will happen in the future about stuff that doesn't have free will. But stuff that has free will, we cannot say what will happen. So if I'm holding someone by the hand, and I claim that I will let the hand go and it will move away or stay there, I have half and half chance to be right, depending on the will of the person. If she wants to stay there and if she wants to move away, like, will you marry me? Kind of situation. She has the choice to move away and free from the question and this kind of thing. So yeah, psychics are the one who says if you grab her hand, she will not go away when you let go. Psychics are those people who claim they know what people will do in the future. And because they claim to know what they do in the future, their claims are related to proving that free will doesn't exist. And since they're wrong, free will do exist every time that they're wrong.
I understand what you're saying, but I still feel like there's a difference between choice and free will. I mean, there's choices, but like you said, within
nature laws.
Yeah. I can, agree with you a little bit more on that, but I still feel like it's more about making choices, and that choice and free will is not the same. I feel like that if there's consequences to what you're doing, there's consequence, that it's not really free will. So you can choose to do whatever, but there's going to be a consequence to it. So that I just feel like that takes away the free will. It's not free.
it's not as free as you would like it to be. I agree with you, but it is still free according to our definition of words. Words are to convey ideas. The idea conveyed by the word free will, or the words, there are two of them, free will, is commonly acknowledged that it takes into account the laws of physics, the laws of nature, and the possibility. So, for example, somebody that has his hands tied is less free than someone that doesn't have the hand tied and has less free will, or this kind of meaning is ingrained or included the idea of according to physics. So the hand-tied person would be able to untie himself if he wills it. No, physics will restrict him and don't allow him to tie. And again, psychics, if they were right, you wouldn't have the chance to say yes when she popped the question, right? Because the psychic says yes, she will say yes, and there is no way for her to say no. So because the psychic says so, and there is no free will, and she can say no. So I hope she doesn't, or he doesn't. I don't know which way you want to do it, but I hope he doesn't. But if he can or she can say no, that's why there is free will.
Dad,
Even
you
the
have
psychic.
something you wanted to say? I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I wanted to ask why being able to predict the choice that a will undertake, why is being able to predict that evidence against free will?
So it goes to the definition of what free will is. Free will is the ability to choose freely without any constraints. And if someone knows the future, you are constrained by this kind of knowledge. There is no other choices for you. There is no other thing that the coffee cup can do than to drop, because the coffee cup doesn't have free will. And if you go further with AI right now, you could predict the answer if you know enough about AI. The answer that the AI will blur out. Even if most people doesn't know what the AI will answer, nevertheless, it is physically possible to predict what it will answer, and there is no other way for the AI to answer otherwise.
Yeah, but I mean, why does anticipating the desires of a will mean that it is constrained to your knowledge? Wouldn't your knowledge just be of the state of the will that's making a choice that? Yeah, let's take the cup. So in the experiment where you have the coffee cup and the water bottle, when you look on the EEG or EKG, you'll see something that corresponds to the desire for water. But the will is what we're investigating. We're investigating the freedom of the will. And if the will contains the desire to drink water, how is that a limit on the will? Because the will is the thing that is free to make a choice, and it's choosing water, right?
I don't understand the question.
Because your will includes your desires. Like you have the will to quench your thirst when you're thirsty, let's say. How is knowing that a constraint on the will? Because you just know something about the will. Like if I know that you desire water, and so I say, hey, you're gonna when you're thirsty later, you're gonna choose the water over the coffee. Is that really is that me taking freedom out of your will, or you had the freedom? Because what I'm saying is that it seems like I could see a world where you had the freedom of choice, and it's a part of your will to want the water over the coffee. And I can notice your wants, but how is that a constraint on your will instead of me noticing an aspect of your will?
So if you know the person enough, she prefers water over a coffee. Yeah, let's say you know that the person doesn't like coffee, so if she's thirsty, you can predict that she will take the water. But what we observe is that sometimes in this specific setup, which is a setup made for disproving free will or proving free will, she will take the cup of coffee because she knows that it is a setup. She will not be directed by her likeness of water or dislikeness of a coffee cup, and she will pick the thing that she dislike just because she wants to prove that there is free will, and she will be able, and she has been able to pick the thing that she dislikes, even if you predicted that she wouldn't. So
Yeah, but
there is sometimes that you can predict the future because of preferences, but in a setup of a study setup kind of thing, no, there is no way to predict.
But isn't that still just knowing more? Like, if her will is to not, if she feels like she's being put in a box by the fact that you will guess that she likes water, so she wants to do something she wouldn't normally do. Isn't that just something? Isn't that just more of her will that you're learning about? So you take the EKG stand, and you see that she's like not wanting to be predicted, and so she's going to choose coffee in her will. She desires the coffee because she desires to make an unpredictable choice, but that's still part of her desire. That's a part of her will, right?
Okay, so I hear you say a lot about EKGs. What you see is the result of the choice that you made. It is the result. What you see on the EKG comes after the choice that you made. The choice is made before you the thing that you perceive in matter happen. Like even if the choice is the connection of those two neurons, every time you connect those two neurons, it will say coffee cup, right? So you take a machine and you connect those two neurons, and the person will not have the choice to pick the coffee cup, right? Let's simplify the thing, and therefore at that point, because you were the one who connected those two, she did not have free will. But if you see those connected without you imposing them to connect, then she is the one responsible. Free will is about responsibility, basically. Free will is who is responsible, who is the cause for this action, a gesture, a word, or those kind of things. So, for example, the when you hit your elbow and it goes like this, this is not free will. You are not responsible. It's a reaction, or it's or how do you call that in English? Sorry, I'm French. By the way. Reaction. Anyway, it's your will is not involved in what happens when you hit it's more than even the elbow, but you know what I mean. So your will is not always involved. If your hand is burning, you will remove your hand before you willingly remove your hand. It's a reflex, like you go like, oh, no. And then you say, yeah, I want to remove my hand. And the thing with the will is it can goes against reflex. For example, the hand on the hot stove, you can put your hand there and go against the reflex of removing it and burning your hand. It is the will can go against your reflex. That's why you have good and bad and things that you can do that are reflexively bad, but you can still do them. Eating too much and those Twinkies that you eat kind of thing. They're bad, but you're like, yeah, I'm taking them.
Sister Patty, apostate sister, said, I can't convince myself that we ultimately have free will given our DNA, plus the inputs of our lived experiences. I think of it like our hardware and software, just inputs and outputs. I can see that. I can definitely see that. We think about our DNA and the things that we've gone through, a lot of the things that we do, it's not that we intend to even do. They're just part of who we are. And we talk about different, I don't know how you all feel about it, but just different, like the things that your ancestors went through, your parents went through, your grandparents, whatever, all of that is in their DNA and it's being passed down to us. And that sometimes causes us to behave in ways that maybe we would behave differently had they not gone through the things that they went through. So yeah, I think that also takes away free will. Like we're just operating on, like it says, like the DNA and the lived experiences of things that we've gone through. And that, you know, well, that's kind of going in another direction too. But I mean, think about people with like mental health and drug issues, mental health issues, and what is it? Behavioral health issues and whatnot. Where does free will come in with those type of situations?
Yeah, that's responsibility. It is not me. It is my gene. So you don't have to put me into jail. I didn't want it. I'm like, yeah, no, sorry. You're responsible for your action. You have free. You could have done otherwise. That's why free will exists. And if there is no free will, there is no responsibility involved. You could not condemn someone for their choices.
So yeah, I don't want to, Diane. I don't know how much longer you have. I don't want to
Yeah, a
keep
couple
this
more
going.
minutes.
A couple
We
more
got a couple
minutes.
more
Well,
minutes. Yeah.
this might go longer than a couple more minutes if I
Go
start
ahead.
this whole track. So
Go
maybe
ahead.
I want to clarify some things. Are you vying for free will or against free will, Luke? I'm not sure. I'm not certain there. I'm
I believe
confused.
there
as
is
to
free
what-
will.
Okay. All right. Okay. This might go to a different show. We might have to do this, get together and do this again, because I could go for hours on this one. I thought at first you were saying there is no free will and that we can falsify free will, and I think that was part of the confusion. So I don't think there is free will. I don't think we can falsify free will, because just understanding there are things that we just have to accept, that the skeptical side there are things that we just don't necessarily know. What we do have is all the physical evidence. Anything outside of that physical evidence we don't really have, right? Tell me what we understand beyond physicality.
So right now, we have physical evidence and we have emotional evidence. My mother loves me, those kind of evidence that is there that are not physical per se. You could argue that they are still physical because there are genes and hormones and going through your body, this kind of thing. It's still physical if you want to. But, like when we say physical evidence, emotions are not part of physical evidence, right? So there are things that are non-physical evidence, but there is physical evidence for free will. I talked about the psychics, which is a physical evidence for the presence of free will.
Yeah, I don't think any of that is necessarily good evidence. I mean, all of that stuff can be described through physical things that we understand. Choices, again, I go back to what we talked about earlier about, is a single-celled organism like an amoeba making a choice when it reaches out to get food? Is that a conscious, where does this choice emerge along from that point, or even earlier or future? Where does conscious free will emerge as a thing? Any different from the thing that existed prior to it? Where's that line that says it is free will? I think animals,
That's a
creatures
good
that we
question.
can prove,
To answer the
animals,
question,
other things that we prove, they make choices just as we do. Do
wait,
they also have free will? So
that's another
all that
question.
stuff
Let
has
me
to be
answer the first one.
contended with.
The first one is when, and when does free will come into creation? Right? I'm a Catholic, so God is the one responsible for free will. God is the one who gave free will to Adam and Eve.
Okay.
That's the one, right? There is a point in time where the person before didn't have free will, and this one had free will. The parents didn't have free will, and the son or daughter had free will. There is a point in time Okay, so shit. Another person said he thought I was anti-free will. I'm like,
Yeah, I was totally confused. My fault.
I am
And
way pro-free
actually,
will.
the God thing is makes total sense now too. I didn't understand that either, so
Yeah.
maybe we should have clarified that up front. And
Mm.
I always feel like I have to have this disclaimer because I'm not a debate bro. I don't want to sit here and tell you you're wrong. And I'm right. That's just not what I do. And my disclaimer is like I allow other people. Well, I don't allow anybody to have anything. It's your choice. You can have your own view of how you view the world. But
My free
but
choice.
if we start going into God, and God gave was maybe the first mover, the first cause, the thing that always existed. That's a whole other realm than I live. So, and that's totally fair. Like I those are in the realms of things that to me are unfalsifiable. So we can't say they're not true. But I live empirically. I live empirically based on the evidence that we have.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are unfalsifiable. Your claim
Yeah.
that there is no free
Oh,
will
I
is
agree. No,
unfalsifiable.
I agree.
And for me,
Lack of
all of those
falsifiability doesn't make truths. That's not what I'm saying. So
all of those who claim that is unfalsifiable when they don't know how to falsify it, yeah, they don't know how to falsify, are making the argument from ignorance that I talked about earlier. They're saying something based on nothing. There's absence of knowledge where they blew it from to arrive to the conclusion it is unfalsifiable. So no, go from this
incredulity. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I agree with that totally. That's where I live, but I obviously at some point take a U-turn from your perspective where everything is physical. For me, there is no necessary need to understand if there was a first mover, a first cause, or if things are just infinitely reductive, if it's infinitism or circular. Those are all things that we can't really come to answers to. What we can come to answers to are what we can prove empirically here. So that's just where I live personally. So Don, anything to say there, buddy? Diane had to step away. She had to do something real quick, and anyways, I'm willing to go into any of those other topics if you want, but once again, I'm not here to tell you you're right or wrong. So,
and I'm along quite a bit along the same lines as Brian. So yeah, if you guys want to dig into religion and the Kalam cosmological argument, which is what it sounds like this is turning into, we can definitely do that. But again, I'm not here to change anyone's mind.
So the way I understand it, Dahl thinks it's all true, right, Dahl?
I added him back to the stage twice. I didn't know if he meant to come down or what.
I keep accidentally leaving the chat instead of backing up or hitting the little X. I back all the way out. I'm a fool.
Go ahead.
All of it can be right if you frame it the right way. So, like, I think free will can be a thing that exists, but it's not going to be some fundamental, like, your will is totally free from all constraint. If you define will or freedom certain ways, then there won't be any such thing as free will. But I think you can do the same with determinism. You can see everything. You can come from it from the perspective where everything is freedom until you hit a constraint, and then it's just the free will would be working around certain constraints. And then what I was trying to kind of point towards earlier was I think that the definition of will is important. I think if will is a totally conscious thing, I think the conscious side of ourselves are inseparable from our subconscious, and our subconscious is inseparable from our DNA and our RNA and our proteins and all that. Eventually you get down to like the mechanics of it. And so I think if you're going to define, like if you define will as only the consciousness side of it, then I think you're going to be highly restrained and highly determined. But I think you can open it up if the subconscious parts of your will, because that's where your desires are, and that's where the EKG scans your brain and sees you'll pick coffee instead of water or whatever.
I mean, those would be some of the arguments. Yeah. Whether I agree with them or not, or have things to say about them would be a whole other question.
Yeah.
But yeah, your perspective would, I think, because you think those things can necessarily be true depending on how you look. This is kind of your part and parcel to your pluralism, right?
Yeah, there's some structure, and I think that almost any concept we build can map on to the structure of reality if we make it fit right. We have to make it fit with the structure of reality, whatever's there.
Did I hear that Luke is Catholic? Is that what I heard while I was away?
Yeah, I'm a Catholic. Yeah.
Okay. So
The best
do you
kind of
believe that
Christians.
free will is in the Bible? What's that?
Sorry, do I believe that?
Do you believe that the Bible says that we have free will?
Yeah, well, yeah. I believe that in the Bible you have this message that there is free will. Yeah.
So and this is before you came on. I had read a few scriptures that kind of go against that, and I have scriptures that go with it as well. But in Ephesians, it says he chose us in him before the foundation of the world that we should be holy and blameless before him. And then also in John, it says no one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them.
Yeah.
Romans says for those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. So like those are talking more about, being predestined, like he already destined for us to be
Yeah.
this or that. So where's the free will in that?
It's a misinterpretation on your part. So when you read those texts, and the interpretation that you have of those texts is the wrong interpretation. That's what most people in your case have. They read the text without using the rest of the context. So the thing I do usually in this situation, it's not the first time I hear about those passages when I talk about free will. All right, Brian. Brian has to go. There is a text in the private chat. You see that? In our conversation.
Where?
Private chat. Maybe comments. Should I paste it?
Okay. Gotcha.
It goes, our team has been on fire this season. So if you read it, you don't have to read it, but from the few first sentences, you understand where I'm going with that. I'm talking about a team that and using a paraphrase and saying killing the other team, we killed the other team. I use words that don't mean what they really mean. I have a whole text about that, and I end the text with context matter. The text meaning is tied to its tradition. Oh, there is word miss. They are literally missing in my anyway. Traditional interpretation within a community of readers. So what it means is that when you have a text like the one you cited, you need to take into account who was it written for, when was it written, and what was the tradition at the time. Okay, you cannot have a text picked from the Bible without those three things. And when you take into account those three things, it doesn't convey the idea. The text that you are using is not used with the purpose of talking about free will. It's used with another purpose. Like this text right here, the purpose of the text that is written right here in the chat is not for the purpose of teaching about how we won the match last week. It is for the purpose of being used as an example to teach about how context matter.
So when we talk about John 6, when he says no one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, I mean, what is the context of that? I mean, how does that not mean what it says?
What does it mean what does John mean when he says that? Is that your question?
Yeah, because that suggests, that
so John
that we're drawn. If you come to the Father, you're drawn to the Father. And so not everybody has that opportunity. So not everybody has the free will to be drawn to the Father. Like it's saying that no one can come unless the Father who sent me draws them. So
Yeah.
where's the free will in
You're
that?
referring back to the words instead
Yeah,
of
because words.
descending the. Yeah. It's like you were saying, but it is killed. They were killed. You look in the text. It is right that he killed the other team. I'm like, yeah, don't refer to the text.
Then what do I
Understand
refer to?
what the author was trying to say when he wrote those words. We didn't kill the other team per se. We win the other team. And even if the meaning is winning the other team, the purpose of the text wasn't to talk about the victory, it was to talk about the context, how context matter. Because in reality, there never had been a team.
I mean, I understand what context is.
Okay,
I
so
mean,
in the context of John,
mhm.
what does he mean? What is the idea that he wants to convey when he's writing those words? What is the purpose of those words? Okay, the purpose of the words that he wrote is follow God's will. If you want to go to heaven, or if you want to do good, to do the right thing, you have to follow, to choose the will of God. If we are talking about free will, it's a choice that you have. You can do either the will of God or not the will of God.
And if you don't do the will of God, then there are negative consequences to that, which brings me back to the thing that then it's not really free.
Oh,
it's not really free will.
Let's say the will of God is for you to not put your hands on the oven, right? If you put your hands on the oven, there will be bad consequences. You will be burned, right? Is it the will of God for you to be burned? Kind of. He's the one who made the rules of nature. But the will of God was for you to not put your hand onto the oven. So, yeah, follow the will of God. Don't put your hand on the oven if you want to have bad consequences.
I mean, there's a lot. If I really get into this conversation is going to go way
have fun. Aren't we here for that? It's a podcast. You're the host. That's your thing. You do whatever you want. It's your show.
I've got another hour and a half
wait
so.
a minute, Dow. No, I want to hear from Dow because yes, thank you for bringing that up. Say it, Dow. Yeah, and what you said in the private chat. Give me that. Yeah.
I can't go look up the exact quote because it'll take me out of the chat, but I know that there's a verse where I think it was Jesus, or Jesus has the Lord God harden someone's heart.
Pharaoh's heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
where was Pharaoh's free will in that? Where was Pharaoh's free will in that?
Again,
if God
false interpretation, incorrect interpretation of the scripture.
Let his people go, then where is the free will in that? God, it says God hardened his heart. So there was no free will in that.
If you interpret it literally, which is the incorrect interpretation.
So what is literal and what is not literal? That's what I'm saying. Like this.
So how do you differentiate between the literal, what is the correct interpretation of a text, like the one about Pharaoh? The correct interpretation has to be taken into the context, with the context. We agreed on that earlier, Diane, right?
I understand that. And the context was that he hardened his heart so that he would not let his people go, so that he could put all the plagues on him. And
you are claiming that God really did what is written. It's a claim that you have.
I mean, that's what it says, right? So
how do you decide?
How do you decide what words in the Bible are literal and what words in the Bible are not literal? How do you determine that?
The same way I determine that the words I use in my text are literal or not literal. Was there really a team? Did we really kill them? Were we really on fire? How do you determine that, Diane? Please answer the question and tell me how is it different when it comes to the Odintes.
So what now? Say it again. Sorry.
So the text, our team has been on fire this season. Last week we killed the other team. That text. How do you determine how to interpret that correctly?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't read the whole thing.
Yeah, just the first phrase is enough.
Hold on. Let me go back. Yeah, Don, exactly. Our team has been on fire this season. So are you saying because it's saying on fire, so it's not really, you're not saying that they're literally on fire? Is that what you're going for? Is that what you're saying?
Kind of.
Okay.
There is one more step after that.
Last week we killed the other team, so you didn't literally kill the other team. But okay, I get that. But when it comes to reading the Bible, how do you decide what's literal and what's not literal?
The same way you decide this is to be taken literally or not. How do you decide that?
So are you telling me that when we read the Bible and it talks about how God had the Israelites go and kill the other nations and take their land and all that, you're telling me that wasn't literal?
You have to check it before asking the question. You have to make sure that your interpretation is the correct one.
I mean, I don't have exact scripture, but I know that in the Old Testament, they were told to go and kill other people of other lands, take their land, kill
That's what's written.
everybody
You're
except for the
correct.
virgins. You can keep the virgins for yourself.
Yeah.
So you tell me that wasn't literal?
Again, I'm telling you that if you claim that it is literal, you must have proof of that. You must have.
Well, I mean, I
proof
wasn't there.
that
So what other proof is there other than the words?
Were you there for the team that I killed? You weren't there. You don't need to be there to demonstrate that no one was killed, right?
So if no one was killed, then what does that mean? What does it mean? What do
Please,
those scriptures
Diane,
mean?
answer the question. Do we agree that we don't need to be there?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So when you ask me, you weren't there, therefore you don't know if it really happened. Well, you don't need to be there to know if it happens. So please, when you read the Bible and you want to interpret the Bible, use the tool available from our knowledge. We have knowledge about the past. We have knowledge about team and how they don't kill each other and how they are not burned into others fire and don't move like water. We have this kind of knowledge that is going around, and we have the kind of context where this text is given to you in this specific context. The team doesn't even exist in reality. I'm not part of a team. Even if I wrote our team one last week, I wrote our team and I'm part of a team. The purpose of the text, the whole thing with the whole context, you need to be outside of the text to understand why this text was composed. The text of the Pharaoh has been composed for a reason that is outside the content of the text. Do you understand?
So once again, how did you decide which scriptures you decide to take literal and which scriptures you decide not to take literal?
Once again, the same way we decide how to interpret this text. That's how.
Okay.
It's the same answer I give you every time you ask the question. I never change the answer to the question. The same way you know which one is the correct interpretation of the text our team has been on fire last season. There is a way that you know of. It is really complicated. Yes, it goes towards all your knowledge of words and culture and all of those kind of things that is implied. But this is the way to know which one of those scripture is to be taken literally and not literally. And what does it mean according to the context it was written? You use history for context. So yeah, the same thing applies to this text. Use history, meaning of words, knowledge about culture, our culture and knowledge, and how team are not on fire in the year 2025. Think about this text being written or read by people 1,000 years from now. You know, they would be like, "Oh, can you think about that? That's crazy. People were on fire." And like, come on, don't take the text out of the context, puts it into the context where it was written and who it was written for. And from then, you derive the correct conclusion, the correct interpretation of the text. By the way, I have to really underline here that the correct interpretation of the text I put in the chat is that context matter. The purpose of the text is not to talk about a team that won.
Mm-hmm.
It is to talk about how context matter. That's the correct interpretation of the text that was written in the chat. Same thing apply when it comes to the story of the Pharaoh. You know how to interpret it correctly by using the context where it was written and who it was written for, blah, 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 all of this.
Mm.
I hope that answers your question.
It makes no sense, but yeah.
It makes
Don, is
no
there anything
sense.
else? Don, would you like to add anything to this conversation?
It makes no sense. Which part doesn't make sense? What?
Well,
Don.
it's an argument I've heard before. It's circular reasoning. The Bible tells me so, for the Bible tells me so. And it's true because the Bible tells me it's true. And
What?
this isn't good enough for skeptics. And that's I've had this argument, and I've heard these reasons before, and they're unfalsifiable. And the context is you're always taking it out of context. So I'm completely with you on this, Diane. It's nonsensical and circular.
Yeah.
I mean, you are incorrect in your claim. Please demonstrate it.
Well,
Or
I'm like
don't.
Brian. I
That's
heard Brian
true.
say earlier
And
today that he's
I don't
not
want to
invaded, and I'm not
hijack
either,
your
so.
show, and I don't want to do that. But the guy just said something around me that was incorrect, so I kind of want him to support his claim, and you're agreeing with him. I'm like, okay, and you just said that you don't understand what I'm saying before, and then you say, yeah, that's completely correct. So either you understand what I was saying and you say it was a circular, or you don't understand what I was saying.
It is
And
circular. It doesn't make sense to me.
May I interject here?
Mm-hmm.
Whew, man, let me tell you. So where do we start? It's like you guys are already way too deep for me, because the first place that I would start is, what's your justification for the existence of God? What is God? That's where I would start, because I assume you put weight in the Bible, in the texts of the Bible, in the words, or whatever the metaphor, the stories, whatever morals, ethical stories they're teaching us. You put weight in those because you think they're divinely inspired, divinely created by or some means other than humans writing words on paper. So therefore, there has to be some existence of something that's, so it leads to God. That to all roads lead to Rome. To me, it leads to God. What would be your justification for God? Like, is it the cosmological argument? It is the teleological argument, the moral argument, the emotional argument. Where do you lie in your justification for God?
All of them. It's usually ontological argument, which is the strongest one, the prime mover argument kind of thing, or kalam, or whatever you want to call it. This argument is
so God must, like, you don't understand reality, so God must have created reality, and that's why you think God exists, because we don't have the ability to understand what created reality in and of itself. And that concept is what you call God. This is what you call maybe truth. I have Catholics in my family. So I'm a little familiar with these arguments.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Could you repeat it?
The question is, you're saying if it's the ontological argument, God is the reason for reality and existence in and of itself, right?
Why is there something instead of nothing? The answer is God. Yeah.
Right. So you understand there's tons of critiques of that particular stance, right?
I heard them. They are invalid because they are based on how do I say the name was? argument of ignorance. So argument of ignorance or from ignorance is arguments that are basis of we don't know, therefore you must be wrong.
No. So yes, if somebody's making a claim based on that, based on the argument from ignorance, I would agree. But we don't use falsifiability, unfalsifiability as a means for a truth. We have lots of other ways to test the consistency of truths, of reality. And so I just wanted to clarify that, because to me, and you may differ here, and that's totally fine. Once again, I'm not here to tell you you're right or you're wrong. To me, there is no evidence for some divine inspiration going on here beyond the evidence that we have. If you take that leap and say that we have evidence of something that we don't have evidence of, and if you take that evidence as the Bible, that's the cyclical portion we're talking about here. God exists because the Bible, and Bible exists because of God, and or the Bible exists because of Bible, and we should take the Bible literally or not literally, metaphorically or whatever the interpretation is. That's just very loose to me. So totally granted, you're allowed to hold your own position.
You claim that we don't have evidence for things that we don't have evidence for. It is one of your claims. You say we don't have evidence for God.
No, that was my attempt at trying to steel man you to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we do have evidence for God. So if someone were to claim that we don't have evidence for God, he will be having a claim based on the arguments from ignorance that we talked about, and those kind of things. He doesn't know what evidence is when it comes to God, and therefore cannot claim that we don't have evidence for God.
What I'm saying is, if that's your evidence, that's weak evidence. That's what I'm saying. Because falsifiability, that if you can falsify something, that means it's not true. If you can't falsify it, then we don't know. And that's not evidence that we should weigh for a truth.
Brian, we talk about falsifiability, about free will. I demonstrate to you how to falsify free will. And from the demonstration, you say, no, it doesn't falsify free will. So we disagree on what falsifiability means, right? And that's the thing that your phrase doesn't hold in you.
I think we disagree on the importance of falsifiability. I think that's what it is. It's very insignificant to not be able to falsify something, to me. So
the argument from secular reasoning argument is the foundation is falsifiability. It's unfalsifiable because it's circular. You need falsifiability to have counter arguments or policy arguments. You need this kind of falsifiability to have them.
Right, and this is how we build truths, right? And the evidence, as we go along, we can falsify some things and say these things are not true necessarily, but we can't get to a point where we can prove God as true.
We can't?
No.
Why can't we?
In my opinion, we can't. If you think we can, that's a whole other story. I think that's the difference of opinion here. But what I don't hear is good justification for that. That's what I don't hear.
There you go. You inserted the good justification, but as if you knew what good is for justification for God, and you don't know. It's an argument from ignorance. You don't know what it would.
100% agree with you. It would be what I consider, and I think we'd probably get other maybe consensus around here, but that's not being, beyond that. All that says is we have consensus. You could be right. I'm not saying you absolutely 100% are wrong. That's where I live. I live in a place where I'm not going to tell you you're right or wrong. I just disagree with you. That's all.
And most of the word.
And that's why Brian and I get along so well, because, we have the things that we see and that we believe and everything, but, we're not, big on debating. But I want to ask the question, what is your justification that God is real? What is your proof that God is real?
My proof? It's not enough for you or Brian. My proof is not enough for either of atheist or agnostic people out there. It's not a good enough evidence for God, right? So if you ask me that, and I tell you the prime mover argument, You will say, well, it's not good enough, and you go on the reason why it's not good enough. But that's not a fruitful conversation. It will be fruitful if you had what would convince you that there is God. That's the answer to that question. Will allow you to build an argument from knowledge instead of the argument from ignorance, and that's usually what happens when you can always criticize things. People in the web right now will have the critics about the shape of the earth, and they say, I'm not convinced by those that claim that it's spherical, and they will give you really good reason why it is unlikely or it is not convincing that it is spherical. They will give you really good reason. They will not claim that the earth is flat. They will just say, I don't have enough evidence to claim that the earth is spherical. They will not hold a claim. They will have the argument from ignorance, where there is no way for us to know. They will argue about knowledge and how knowledge cannot be 100% certainty, and they will give you arguments to why your claims are bad according to them. They are not good arguments according to them. And then they will find people that agree with them and say, oh, look at the room. All the room agree with me that it is not good arguments. And they will point to the room of, we call them not flat, it's globe skeptics. That's the name of those who doubt the shape of the globe and the earth, sorry. So globe skeptics will find group and argue with people and say, yeah, I can make a show and argue about my skepticism of the globe, and it will be for a really good show.
May I interject again?
Yeah, have fun.
Are you familiar with? I think it's Hume's teapot, but it originates somewhere else, not Hume, someone else's teapot. Are you familiar with that scenario?
Yep.
Okay, so we can't falsify that there's a teapot sitting on the rings of Saturn, on the underside of Saturn. So no, we can't really. It could be there at this moment. So we could also bring in thought experiments like, who was the guy? Dahl, help me out here. I'm having a senior moment for the name, but he said things like the 5 minutes ago or last Thursdayism, where you don't know that the entire universe is being wiped out and recreated at every moment. 5 minutes ago, last Thursday, whenever it is, you don't know because you can't falsify that this isn't happening at any moment. I forget the guy's name. I can't. Do you remember, Dahl?
I don't remember either, unfortunately.
Shoot. Anyways, he's early 20th century dude. Anyways, he's popular for a lot of different thought experiments of what you might classify or categorize as radical skepticism. So these are the reasons why I don't believe in things like this, because you can't falsify those things. You think you can. Even with physics today, you can't falsify those things at any moment. That doesn't make a truth. Right. That's why lack of falsifiability is not strong evidence. So what we do have is we have empirical evidence. That's where I come from.
All right. Well, it's almost 5 o'clock, Ryan. Does anybody else want to say anything else before we wrap this up?
I could do a spiel, but it might take a minute. Honestly,
go ahead.
I am not a Catholic or a part of the Catholic tradition, so me and Luke probably disagree in spots, if that isn't already apparent. I do have. I don't know. I think the whole problem of God is kind of weird because I think it runs into a thing of self-reference, and it's because my understanding is that God is essentially like objective reality. Like God is the truth. God is the way that everything follows. It's the way of all things. And so like to falsify, how do you prove the truth exists is kind of a similar question to How do you prove God is real? And so I think the question is maybe not bad, but it's weird, and it leads to a bunch more questions where we get into problem of self-reference and stuff like that. But I also think that Luke could be right about the interpretation thing. I think it's a bad idea to consider any book like directly the word of God or something close to that. It can be inspired, but all books are inspired by the truth. That's where we start learning, like we're born into this world. But so like if you're going to need a source to find the right interpretation of the book, you're going to be probably looking at what the people were thinking at the time. So you're going to want scholars and historians, and you're going to want to get in the mindset of the people writing the book to figure out the meaning behind it. And I guess that's where I stand.
And I get all that, and I mean, I feel like that, but me coming from Christianity, the big problem I have is that everybody's interpretation of the book is different, and everybody chooses to believe, that it's literal. Some people believe it's literal. Some people believe that it's not to be taken literally, and and in the book itself, it says that God's not the author of confusion. So that's my whole thing. It is confusing because everybody has their own interpretation. So that's my whole issue, and that's why I ask those questions. Like, how do you know what's literal and what's not? Because what he says is literal or not literal, the next person is going to say different.
Yeah.
But that's just me. Like I said, just coming out of Christianity, and just like for me right now, that's just the topic of most of my conversations, and majority of my my videos, my interviews. Well, all of my interviews are basically about deconstructing from Christianity. We have several interviews on this channel, and that's what we talk about. So yeah, that's where that the line of questioning came from. Don or Luke, y'all have anything else you want to say before we get off of here?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for having me on and let me speak. I always enjoy these conversations. This one went into several different branches from where it began, and I think that's great too. I wanted to refute Luke's assertion that I or any of us might have been arguing from ignorance. I don't know many of y'all's backgrounds very much. Brian, maybe a little more than anyone else, but I was an ordained minister, and I rode with a motorcycle ministry, and we used our motorcycles to reach out. So I did once argue from his definition of the place of knowledge, and I continue to do so. And that's through the pursuit of knowledge what led me to skepticism, then atheism, and now anti-theism. And my positive claim that there are no gods, or the fact that all gods presented to me are man-made, as they've been presented to me by men.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with some of that, a lot of that. And I thank you for coming on and talking with us today. I hope you'll come back again next time.
Sure.
Whenever you have an opportunity. We don't have a schedule or anything. We just kind of jump on here when we both have time.
Great. Well, that sounds awesome. I had a wonderful time. I'd be happy to come back.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thank you, Diane. And it was nice to meet you, Luke. Dalsu, thanks for joining in too, man.
Yep. Thank you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
all
you.
of you for coming.
Yeah,
Nice to
thanks
meet
for
all of
having
you.
me.
Luke, thank you
Nice
for
meeting
coming
you.
on and talking with us today.
You're welcome. If you have more questions, I'll be available through Saskyle, I think the name is. So just tell him, you reached from Luke, can you reach him again? And this kind of thing. I'll be happy to answer the questions.
All right.
Remember this text about the team. and how you interpret it correctly, it will be useful for the rest of the conversation you have about the interpretation of the Bible.
All right. Thanks for everybody. And until next time, see you.
See you later. Bye-bye.